All those are the honourable member for Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Give others a minute to gather their thoughts. Right, thank you, Mr. President. I'm very happy to rise to speak on this bill, the Disability Inclusion and Safeguarding Bill 2024. And I look forward to hearing contributions from other members. I certainly appreciated the Minister's second reading speech and the detail that it contained. There has been an extensive effort from community stakeholders, in particular Tasmanians with disability and disability service providers, to provide input and expertise and guidance in shaping this bill. It's clear to me, Mr. President, that a great deal of thought and care has gone into this bill, which represents a significant step forward in establishing a framework to protect, promote and fulfil the rights of Tasmanians with disability, including the right to access services and to drive greater inclusion in our state. It will also put arrangements in place to manage and monitor the use of restrictive practices in the context of disability care in a considerably more accountable way. However, there is more to do on that front, which I'll mention later. Mr. President, the Minister has mentioned some of the context in recent years around the development in which this bill has been developed. Things that have been quite significant in terms of the lives of people with disability and our broader community. The NDIS, with all the opportunities that it has provided, along with all the ongoing challenges that it still faces and the things we grapple with to make that yet more functional and a better platform for supporting people in our community. There's also the Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of People with Disability, with its recommendations signposting a great deal of work needed at a state and federal level. And in this context, we see this bill put forward as an effort to improve considerably on our previous Disability Services Act, which was no longer fit for purpose and didn't need to be brought into a modern context. So will this bill be the final word, Mr. President, on the changes and reforms needed? It certainly won't be, and none of us are expecting it to be. I think there's a well-expressed and broad willingness to continue good work in this area under the leadership of the Minister and the Government, and with the absolute expertise and valuable input of people in the community, Tasmanians with disability, service providers and those who also care and want to improve this space. So while it won't be the final word on the topic, Mr. President, it's clear to me that we've shifted onto the right track here with this bill, and there's a commitment and intention to continue to progress down this positive path with further reforms and developments yet to come, including the Minister indicating and responding very positively to a request for a more specific review timeframe for this bill, which is incredibly important to have that confidence for the people in the community that we will be taking a look and seeing how things are going not too far down the track. It's a really good approach to continuous improvement in this space and allows for people to take a breath and to feel confident that we're on our way, but it's not the end point yet. So I commend the Minister for her demonstrated commitment to that. Mr. President, we all want to live in a Tasmania where the rights of people with disability are protected, promoted and fulfilled, and where they are free from violence, abuse, neglect and exploitation. This should not be a lofty pie-in-the-sky aspiration for our state, but rather it should be the basic minimum, the foundation on which we build full inclusion for all Tasmanians, including Tasmanians with disability, equal access to services and supports across our community, and alongside that, equal access to opportunities and success. This bill represents the determination for us to build that foundation of rights, inclusion and safeguarding to ensure that Tasmanians with disability have the opportunity to enjoy all those key aspects of a good life that we all aspire to. Mr. President, it will be no surprise to members to hear me praise and celebrate any instance in which we acknowledge fundamental human rights and embed those rights more firmly in our lives and our governance in this state. I will always take the opportunity to point to the need for this state to have a Human Rights Act to form the basis on which we protect, promote and fulfil the human rights of all Tasmanians, and which our nation has signed up to under various UN conventions and instruments. The call for a Human Rights Act will only grow stronger. Indeed, in May this year, we've seen the Tasmanian Law Reform Institute publish an update to its original 2007 report examining the proposal for a Tasmanian Charter of Rights or Human Rights Act. That update reiterates the original recommendation for a charter or act to be established in this state, outlines the elements that should be covered in such an act and encourages us to do so. However, as we wait and we work towards what I believe is that inevitable step, it's important that we take every opportunity to progress a rights-based approach in any other relevant areas that present themselves. And this bill has certainly been a good opportunity to do that. And I congratulate the Minister again and those stakeholders who have worked together to bring that further to the forefront in this bill. And it's really pleasing to see that and must be commended. Mr President, I appreciate that this bill presents a strategic and purposeful approach to embedding inclusion into the fabric of our state authorities and entities through mandating a regime of disability inclusion planning under the advice of the Disability Inclusion Advisory Council. The success of these efforts to drive tangible change will remain to be seen as they are established and given effect to over time. I hope they will assist in directly combating the discrimination and exclusion that we know is still far too common in our community and our institutions, and help to drive positive cultural change. I do note that advocates and stakeholders will point out that inclusion is an outcome that we are looking to achieve, and that fundamental to achieving that outcome is a rights basis, with human rights being respected and protected, and having government work in partnership with people with disability in order to claim and hold those rights, and then also realise that outcome of inclusion. Mr President, the bill also legislates the Office of the Disability Commissioner. Finally. While this commitment was made in 2021, we've had someone appointed to the role for a couple of years now, but there's been no legislative basis for providing for its functions and powers. And this, though, is a culmination of years and years of advocacy. I recall from my time working at TASCOS, which is 10 to 15 years ago now, that we in the community services sector then were advocating actively for the establishment of a Disability Services Commissioner, and those calls at that date had already been in place for years before that. So I can't tell you, Mr President, how incredibly pleasing it is to see this finally achieved, and I congratulate the Minister on the culmination of that. It has been a long road. This role of Disability Commissioner will provide pivotal leadership, but also, importantly, monitoring and reporting, backed up by powers to undertake those functions. I think it is absolutely essential that the bill includes the requirement that it does, which is that the Disability Commissioner be a person with disability, and that anyone who steps into the acting role is also a person with disability. I think that is, as it should be, highlighting that lived experience, and a person with direct experience in that way belongs in that role, can provide leadership in that role, and will be a role model for others to show what can be achieved in terms of that leadership. So I welcome that especially. Mr President, another role established in the bill is that of the Senior Practitioner for oversight of the use of restrictive practices. This is a strengthening of an existing role, is my understanding, and it's crucial for greater protection and accountability in this highly problematic space. Quite frankly, we have a lot more work to do, I think, when it comes to how we deal with restrictive practices. And I don't necessarily think that the topic and the issue of restrictive practices belongs in a bill that's about inclusion and rights, but I understand why it's still sitting here now. I appreciate the Minister, in her second reading speech, taking quite a bit of time to go over a lot of detail in this area, because we know that restrictive practices are not well understood in the general community. but they're relevant in actually a whole range of settings, not just in the disability space, but also in aged care, in healthcare, in mental health care, and even in our education settings. The area of restrictive practices is high risk for breaches of human rights and abuse. And it's something we need to have a comprehensive understanding of and approach to managing in this state. So I anticipate that while we're making improvements here in this bill, in respect of the disability area and restrictive practices, we'll be revisiting this topic, I think, more holistically, hopefully, in the not too distant future. It's only right that we do that. Mr President, I know we will delve into the detail of the bill in the committee stage. I'm anticipating we will progress to that point. I know the Minister has some very positive further amendments to present on the bill. I welcome them, and I thank the Minister for her dedication to being open and listening to stakeholders and working very collaboratively with them to continue adjusting this bill in positive ways. I flag with members and have flagged with members that I also have a very small number of amendments that I'm likely to move on the bill in committee stage, which I believe are very much in keeping with the principles and intent of the bill overall, and which were discussed in some measure in briefings we had with stakeholders this morning, and alongside some of the other changes we're looking to make to the bill. So on that, Mr President, I'll wrap up my brief contribution on what is a large bill but also a very important bill. It has consequence, this bill. So I'll restate my support for it. It's a firm step forward and has come about under the leadership of a minister who clearly understands and is engaging purposefully in this space. That's admirable. It's not an end point. There is much work still to do, and we will need to carefully assess how the reforms in the bill translate into practice and delivery of outcomes. It's particularly pleasing to see, as I said, that we've got the review locked in for the near future. We'll have that opportunity to make an assessment in a formal way to guide further improvements and point us in the direction of where to next. So, Mr President, I welcome the bill and I certainly support the bill. I think it's particularly pleasing to see some of the feedback circulated from other stakeholders in the community around their clear appreciation and delight for the arrival of this bill and for the way in which it's been developed and put together. It's particularly nice to see a bill come through this place that does have such a lot of goodwill around it and engagement with it. So thank you to the Minister and the Government for that. I support the bill and I look forward to going into details during that committee stage, should we get there.
Question is the bill